Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I rise today to speak to the motion brought forward by the Honourable Member from Central Okanagan, Similkameen Nicola. And I will be sharing my time with the member from Sherwood Park, Fort Saskatchewan. I thank the Honourable Member from Central Okanagan, Similkameen Nicola, for his continued efforts to promote economic vibrancy through interprovincial trade across our great nation. Mr. Speaker, I'm motivated to speak in support of this motion because I find myself asking the same question that many Canadians are asking. Why not? Why would we delay action that would free Canadians to offering their goods to fellow Canadians right across our nation? I understand that the previous government committed to working with the provinces and the territories to do away with restrictions that limited interprovincial trade. However, now we have an indication that we should be referring to the Supreme Court so that developing and future legislation and regulations do not cause extended delays in freeing the sale of goods across provincial lines. Let us be clear here. What we are talking about is a court clarification of free trade amongst the provinces and territories. Mr. Speaker, the recent decision handed down by the Supreme Court of New Brunswick confirmed that Section 121 of the Canadian Constitution says, and I quote, "All articles of growth, produce, and manufacture of one of the provinces shall, from and after the reunion, be admitted free into each of the other provinces." It seems pretty clear that the Constitution provides for free trade across provincial boundaries. Although this court decision and campaign has been dubbed Free the Beer, it's about much more than beer. Our fathers of Confederation had the vision and foresight when composing our Canadian Constitution to include this section, this concept, and this liberty. Their vision in forming a nation where all members, constituents of the nation, would be free to trade with each other, to build commerce, and to benefit from the cooperative trade was a vision far beyond its time. And then in 1921, the Gold Seal decision said that this vision, this liberty of Section 121, only meant that interprovincial free trade could occur without any tax or duty imposed as a condition of their admission. The Gold Seal decision somehow became the basis of constricting powers, allowing a patchwork of restrictions to grow over time. Somehow, as provinces and a country, we have lost the clear vision of free trade across our federation the way our founders envisioned it. But now the stage is set to make things right. Back in 2012, Mr. Gerard Comeau, the defendant in the recent court decision, made some decisions. He first decided to take a drive to Quebec and purchase some spirits and beer. I suspect he was not the first New Brunswicker to do such. Upon returning to his home province of New Brunswick, where the Provincial Liquor Act restricts interprovincial importation to 1 bottle of spirits or wine or 12 pints of beer, he was stopped and charged with importation charges. Why? His property was not stolen. No, he had paid for it in Canada, which means he had also paid taxes, federal and provincial, for the goods. Then, when Mr. Comeau decided to challenge the charges laid against him and take the case to court and put his trust in the Constitution of Canada, he sparked a reaction that has raised the profile of Section 121 of the Constitution. Again, it states, all articles of growth, produce, and manufacture of any of the provinces shall, from and after the union, be admitted free into each of the other provinces. That is what Section 121 states. Now, I don't know how that statement could be any more clear, but obviously it has become clouded, manipulated, and misinterpreted over the last 149 years. So here we are today, as our nation looks on, wondering if we might have the wherewithal to uphold the intent, the spirit, and the liberty afforded to us by our forefathers. The liberty to move goods across provincial lines freely. Why would this government risk stalling the process of removing restrictions by not seeking clarity of the Supreme Court so that whatever agreements are reached between the provinces would stand far less risk of being challenged and delayed in their implementation? Does this government doubt that the notion of individual liberty set out in Section 121 of the Constitution is inappropriate? If so, then they should take a look at how much beer, wine, and liquor moves across the river behind this place on the hill on a daily basis, especially on a Friday. But in all seriousness, let us trust Canadians to hold Section 121 of the Constitution as they wish. There have been successes in restoring the spirit of Section 121, and we ought to carry that momentum forward. The agreement on internal trade came into force in 1995 as an intergovernmental trade agreement signed by the Canadians' First Ministers and is aimed at reducing and eliminating barriers for free movement of persons, goods, services, and investment within Canada. These are essential for open, efficient, and a stable economic market. 21 years after the introduction of the Agreement on Internal Trade, we need to move forward again with bolstering interprovincial trade. There are provinces that have taken significant steps in this direction and continue to facilitate interprovincial trade because it yields mutual benefits. Mutual benefits because it works. One example of initiative and leadership at the provincial level in driving interprovincial trade is the new West Partnership Trade Agreement, the NWPTA, which was agreed to by the governments of British Columbia, Alberta, and Saskatchewan. The NWPTA came into effect in 2010 and has been fully implemented since 2013. The NWPTA represents Canada's largest barrier-free interprovincial market. This agreement is an extension of the pre-existing Trade, Investment, and Labour Mobility Agreement between British Columbia and Alberta in 2006. In the NWPTA, BC, Alberta, Saskatchewan became the first jurisdictions in Canada to commit to full harmonization of the rules affecting trade, investment, and labour mobility. This removed barriers to free movement of goods, services, and investment and people between the three provinces. Mr. Speaker, these agreements were hammered out by provincial leaders for the benefit of their constituents. I believe that we too, as federal legislators, can seize the opportunity to bolster our national economy by leading all the provinces and territories to agreements that remove restrictions on trade or the mobility of investment and labour. Canadian businesses, investors, and workers deserve to be treated the same across Canada. The federal government has an opportunity to provide leadership in establishing which agreement to open the doors, or in establishing such an agreement to open doors of the provinces and territories. Some may say this is not possible, that the provinces and territories need to be insulated from each other. The disputes will eclipse any possible benefits of cooperation. Well, I disagree. I believe that a strong economic union means a stronger Canada. I believe that opening doors to the provinces and territories to each other will spur mutual benefits and broader opportunities now and in the future. As I mentioned earlier, this is much more than free beer. It is a much larger issue than that. So let's make it clear again that the hands that trade or choose goods across provincial boundaries should not be changed by the restrictive status quo. Our Constitution was drafted by recognizing interprovincial trade and the value it brought to Canadian economic growth and Canadian buyers of goods. While we have this in our sights, again, let's not lose sight of it for partisan reasons. Let us move this forward for the benefit of Canadians like Mr. Comeau, who want to purchase Canadian goods in other Canadian provinces. As our fellow Canadians look on with the intent at the proceedings here today, let us all be mindful of our duty to protect and, if need be, restore the liberties provided in Section 121 of our Constitution. Thank you, Mr. Speaker.
Questions and comments. Question commentaire. The honourable member for Egmont.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Mr. Speaker, as probably one of the only members sitting in this House today that was a signature to and party to the negotiations that led up to the 1995 AIT, I would like my colleague to comment on how he thinks using the courts would be better than a negotiating process, because after all, we are dealing with 10 sovereign provinces within the Canadian Federation that do handle issues like this. And so I would like if he would expand a bit more on why he feels, or the opposition feels, that the court is the only way to go to resolve trade irritants within the country when negotiations have worked in the past.
Member for North Okanagan, Shuswap.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker, and I thank the honourable member for his question. I believe that the referral to the Supreme Court of Canada for clarification and the negotiation with provinces should go hand in hand. To move negotiations forward and come to agreements without seeking clarity from the courts on how those, or if those negotiations and agreements are constitutional, would simply be wasting time. We could send this decision to the Supreme Court, ask for a referral on it, get the court's opinion so that the future negotiations and legislation could be drafted in compliance with the Constitution. Thank you, Mr. Speaker.
Questions and comments. The honourable member for Edmonton, Strathcona.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Well, I'm finding this debate very interesting. I know that we were going to have it earlier under a slightly different subject area, and I was looking forward to participating. Now it is being more confined simply to a referral to the courts. But I'm a little bit puzzled at the decision of the Conservatives to go in this direction, because as I'm sure they're aware, those who are from BC, Alberta, Saskatchewan, and now Manitoba, that of course we already have the New West Partnership Agreement, and Manitoba is saying maybe we'd like to be part of that. We had the discussions at Tilma before. Even the provinces themselves are wanting to exclude certain areas from opening up the trade. They want to exclude water-related areas, management and conservation of forest fish, the promotion of renewables, the management and conservation of energy and mineral resources. So even if there was this reference to the court and they uphold the decision obtained in New Brunswick, is it not necessary, in fact, that we open up this dialogue, not just among the premiers of the provinces and the territories, but also the Canadian public and workers on what the implications of such decisions might have on the regulation of critical areas like child welfare, environmental, and health?
Honourable member for North Okanagan, Shuswap.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I thank the member. I'm not really clear that there was a real question there, but as I stated, the directive out of this motion is to refer this matter to the Supreme Court so that the Supreme Court of Canada, the highest court in the land, can make a decision, make a referral on how these negotiations and how the legislation should be moved forward so that we don't end up with court battles over the constitutional correctness of these future negotiations and the ones that are maybe taking place right now. Thank you, Mr. Speaker.
Questions and comments. The honourable member for Central Okanagan, Similkameen Nicola.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I just want to thank the member from North Okanagan, Shuswap, for his contribution today, and I'm very happy to have him as a member in this place, and as a fellow British Columbia, I have to have him speak to this issue. I just simply wanted to ask him again. He spoke of the Gold Seal case and how originally that court decision narrowed the application of Section 121. He also spoke of that the Comeau case actually brought new evidence to bear, saying that the original, the Section 121 should be restored to its original meaning, which would call into question a myriad of legislative frameworks and agreements, including an agreement on internal trade. So does the member agree that that is how, when we have questions on the constitutionality, that it is the Supreme Court is the only vehicle to be able to answer or to respond to the original concern that the current interpretation of Section 121 is improper?
For North Okanagan, Shuswap.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker, and I thank the member from Central Okanagan, Similkameen Nicola, for the question. He's very well versed on this, and he certainly knows the fine points of the Gold Seal decision, the Comeau case, and the fact that the Comeau case brought new evidence forward and directed the decision around Section 121 of the Constitution is why this has become important, that we refer to the Supreme Court as the highest ruler in the country around constitutional issues, so that we can move forward in negotiations with certainty that those negotiations will not be challenged in the future. Thank you.